Hello, I'm Andrew Bennett. This is my Module 2 reflection on the theories of self, creativity, and problem solving, and how they influence my teaching and my students' learning. First, the theories of self and how I use them in my classroom. The theory of reciprocal determinism discusses the idea that these three factors, personal factors, environmental factors, and behavioral factors, they're all interrelated. So it doesn't make sense to consider one without considering the other. Personal, we're talking about student attitudes or student beliefs or student ideas, student emotions. Environmental, we're talking about the teacher and the classroom and other students and what things they're all doing and what effect they have on the student. And then behavioral, we're talking about what the kid is doing, what they're doing in terms of showing the teacher what they know, what kinds of acting out behaviors we might be seeing, all those things that the student is doing fit with the behavioral section there. And they're all interrelated, so we're kind of going to jump back and forth between each of those throughout this discussion. First off, focusing mainly on the personal factors and what we as teachers can do to affect those, let's look at self-efficacy, or the sense of, yeah, I can accomplish that, I can do that. We read in the Bruning reading on page 108 that student self-efficacy is strongly related to these critical classroom variables that are discussed there. And I don't think you'd find a teacher anywhere who would say, these variables aren't important. And those are absolutely important. So do we care about self-efficacy? Yes, we do. We want to improve self-efficacy. So let's look at how to do that next. Bruning also offers these techniques for improving student self-efficacy on page 115. I haven't been aware of this this term up until this class, so I haven't really done an explicit job of teaching self-efficacy, something I want to change later in my teaching. It's really been more of an implied thing that has gone along with other topics or other things that I was aware of. So what I have focused more on is the modeling section here. Feedback is something I've done a lot of work with, and then building self-efficacy rather than reducing expectations. Let me talk about how I do each of those in my classroom now. Modeling is used extensively in my physics classes, both by me, that'd be expert level modeling, and by my students, that's the intermediate level modeling. And we basically follow the same procedure that's laid out in our textbook, where we start out with some rationale for why we need to learn this thing, and then the expert level modeling comes through, and then gradually students are doing more and more on their own, putting more things together with less and less teacher intervention and teacher supervision until they get to a point where they're able to model for each other what ought to happen here and help each other expand their understanding. Feedback is something I've worked with a great deal this last year especially. This is the header for one of my assignments for my AP Physics class, but they all look about the same. You'll notice that there's a target date, not a due date for this. I always talk with my students about how I know they all learn it at a little different rate, and some of them will take longer on some topics, and some will take shorter on those topics, and vice versa on other topics. So I give them some flexibility with this. My hope that I express to them here is that they're not going to get to the due date, see that I still don't get how to do this, and just give up on it, forget about it. I want them to keep working at this and keep getting the help that they need and doing the practice they need to do in order to understand these concepts. The concepts are very clearly stated for them. So every assignment has the learning targets that assignment is assessing listed right there. And then all the written feedback and all the verbal feedback I give to students when I give back their papers is in respect to these learning targets. Here's where you are, here's where you need to be, and then here's the path to get to where you need to be. So students don't get that grade back and think, oh, okay, I got a 50% on this one, guess I don't know that very well, and then stop. Say, okay, well, I'm not quite where I need to be, but here I understand how to get to where I want to go. The level of mastery, that's sort of a broad stroke judgment of where the student is. And there's 4 categories that are listed at the bottom there. I like this more than the taking off a point for each little mistake that they made. I think it's it's more holistic and it makes more sense to me, and it's less stressful for me and for my students. And I think it really does help to motivate them to continue. Okay, well, I'm not a master yet, but I am a practitioner of this knowledge. I'm able to use it, just not expertly or not quite masterfully yet, and here's the plan to get me to that next level. Attribution theory is something I've considered a great deal as well. That's how do students view their successes and failures? What are the causes for those? And what do those views, what effect do those have on student behaviors and student emotions? Bruning, Schra, and Norby on page 118 explain that students' attributional responses vary along 3 dimensions. There's the locus of control, whether that's internal or external. Is it me that's controlling this, or is it something outside of me? There's the stability, so that's whether these factors that caused the success or failure, whether those things are constant, like, oh, I'm just not smart, I can't do this, or no, I'm very smart, I can do everything here. Or that'd be a permanent or a stable factor. Or something like, well, you know, I didn't sleep very well last night, so maybe that's why I didn't do so well on this assignment. Or I didn't put as much effort into this time as I should have. And the last one is controllability. Is it something that I can control, or is it something that's beyond my control? Like, a teacher just doesn't like me, that's why I failed this class. Something that I could control would be, you know, I didn't make flashcards like the teacher suggested. Maybe I'll try that next time. This year, as part of our building leadership team, I helped to develop a definition for student achievement to be used during the planning and goal setting and evaluation phases of our school's professional development. Every teacher was asked for input in developing this, and every teacher has since embraced it by learning and implementing strategies to help students develop what we're calling a growth mindset. So we've enacted school-wide policies and recommendations, such as the availability of reteaching and reassessment in all classes in an effort to get students to shift their thinking. We're working to help students see that their success or failure in most activities at school are primarily dependent on themselves. This is an internal locus of control that we're trying to impart on them. We want them to understand that for most activities at school, the factors that determine success can change over time, and with effort or with lack of effort. So that's that stability, or we want an unstable attribution mindset here. And finally, we want them to believe that they have power to determine their learning and their grades. We want them to have a controllable attribution there. In my own classes, I take time each day to have individual and small group conversations, and again, I elaborate on here's where you are, and here's where you need to get, and here's the path. And I also talk with students about, oh, what did you do to prepare for this assessment? And how well do you think that prepared you? And what could you do in the future? And make sure that I keep putting it back to them. You have the power to keep going with this, to keep learning this and to get farther. You haven't gotten there yet, but together we can keep you progressing in that right direction. Too often, I think students are taught in such a way as to develop a sense that every statement made is, well, it's either right or it's wrong. That's a dualistic perspective as described by Bruning on page 142. They think in such absolutes that when they're in school, that when they get to one of those gray areas in life, well, they're unprepared. I think we're doing them a real disservice here by not teaching reflective judgment. Now, science is a natural topic to help students develop their reflective abilities, though this really should be included in every topic. We know that knowledge is constructed. We do, anyway. Our students may not know that. And so because of that, it has the potential to have errors in it. And so it's important for our students to understand this, not only so they don't get hoodwinked, but also so that but also because, as Bruning go on to say on page 144, developing a more sophisticated view of knowledge affects the way one reasons, how long one persists at a difficult task, the degree to which one is metacognitively engaged in self-regulatory activities, and perhaps what academic discipline one enters. So having these skills has broad impacts on students' abilities and future. In my classes, I very frequently ask students to think of counterexamples to what's stated by the textbook, to refute predictions or conclusions of their peers or their teacher, and discuss the limitations of the ideas and relationships that we're discussing in physics. One of the fundamental ideas in science is that every law and theory must be in agreement with all reasonable and replicable observations. Every law and theory that is already in place has passed this hurdle, but we continue to evaluate them in new contexts. Now on to creativity and problem solving, and how I can use that to create a problem-focused and authentic instruction experience for my students. So problem solving, or rather a problem. The requirements for problem solving, we have to first recognize the current and desired states. There is some difference between them. That's the problem. We have to recall relevant information. We have to mentally construct and evaluate potential methods of solving. We have to implement and evaluate strategies. We have to evaluate our solution. This is intensive and calls for a great deal of reflective thinking. Dewey, on page 3 of the reading that we did, elaborates that educative and reflective thought begins with a perceived problem. He goes on to say that difficulty or obstruction in the way of reaching a belief brings us to a pause. In the suspense of uncertainty, we metaphorically climb a tree. We try to find some standpoint from which we can survey additional facts, and getting a more commanding view of the situation may decide how the facts stand related to one another. Demand for the solution of a perplexity is the steadying and guiding factor in the entire process of reflection. So I want my students to be creative. I want them to reflect. Problems and problem solving are an essential way to make that happen. So in our class, students are required to set up all their problems in a certain way. We have a certain format that we follow. First off, we provide some, when we set up a problem, we provide some rationale for learning this material. And that rationale helps to motivate students to learn. And it also gives us some pretty clear evidence when we've completed that learning successfully. In the picture, that's a secret agent laser obstacle course that I do with my physics students, and we look at this at the very beginning of our optics and light and reflection unit, and I kind of use it to guide our study. And what do we need to know in order to be able to set up and then navigate a secret agent laser obstacle course, and get into things like the nature of light and dispersion of light and reflection and all these important physics concepts that are embedded in this one problem-solving activity. The strategy that we use here, first we identify the problem and we represent the problem. And in physics, that often involves drawing of some sort, a free body diagram, something along those lines. We select appropriate strategies and we implement those strategies. And this is something that my students do when they're solving homework-type problems and when they're doing these very open-ended labs where we have a problem where we don't understand what this relationship is and we need to find some strategy of figuring out what that relationship is. That's all that I have for you. Thank you very much for your time.